does James Harden rank as a player?
Not in the top 5. I got him 6. Great player. Top 6 in the NBA at any point. Look, at any point in NBA history, that's a great player. But I'll give you 5 names now I take before James Harden.
Okay.
LeBron James.
Okay.
Who, by the way, just played 82 games. So if everyone agrees he's the best player, he played 82 games.
Do we need the breaking news? Do we need the breaking news alert? That's what we need?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
No,
do I need it?
He's going to build him
Or do
up,
I need,
so don't worry.
do I need that?
2, when healthy, Kawhi Leonard, who, by the way, has been a finals MVP and a great two-way player. My choice for second best overall player in the game when healthy.
Okay.
3, take your pick, AD or KD.
Okay.
Which one do you want? Because it's one of those two and the other guy is 4.
Okay.
Practically 7 feet, great two-way players, both with all-world offenses and great defenders, especially AD. There's 4 guys I just named. And 5, look, when push comes to shove, you taking Steph or you taking Harden? Steph Curry, whatever credit you want to give James Harden for creating the right culture in Houston, and he has, good for him, unbelievable job he has. That's a winning personality he has. Oh, and by personality, I just don't mean that he's a nice guy, which he is. He obviously has a charming personality, but that he's a leader in the right way. Even if Chris Paul is the emotional leader of that team, Harden created a culture that a guy like Chris Paul could fold right into. But who has a better culture than the Warriors? Steph Curry, the unselfish superstar, the off-ball screens, the welcoming in of KD, the whole thing created a situation where KD even wanted to play there. The ball doesn't stick with Steph Curry, right? What superstar in basketball does the ball stick with least? Actually, Steph Curry. And ultimately, Harden hits a lot of shots and he's a good shooter, but he's a volume shooter who's a good shooter. Steph Curry is maybe the greatest shooter ever. He's just a better shooter, and shooting is actually both where a lot of both these guys' values wrapped up. I'm taking Steph over Harden. I got Harden right after Steph. That's amazing. 6th best in basketball.
Here's my thing. I'm not going to sit up there and tell you that you're off your rocker, because I can understand why you made all those selections. I can understand why anybody make all those selections. I'm going to take 2 of those names out of there that'll put James Harden in the top 5 for the purposes of this discussion at this particular moment in time.
Okay.
I'm going to take Kawhi Leonard out of there, and I'm going to take Steph Curry out of there. Now, I know that sounds sacrilegious coming from a basketball savant such as myself. They don't call me Stephen Naismith for nothing. But let me break down what I'm trying to get at you. I'm only talking about for this season in the moment at this particular moment in time. Obviously, I look at Steph, I consider him the greatest shooter we have ever seen. I will never deviate from that. I know how formidable Kawhi Leonard was, not this past season because he only played the last 9 games, but the year before, okay? I get all of that. Do you know that Kawhi Leonard never averaged 20 points a game until 2 seasons ago? I mean, this is what we're talking about here. So we know what a stout defender he is, and we know what ability he has. But in terms of the go-get-it, want-it factor, want-it-bad factor, Max Kellerman, I'm not sure that's always been the case with Kawhi Leonard. Matter of fact, I take it back. I am sure. That has not always been the case with Kawhi Leonard. Now, you're playing in a system offense. You had Tim Duncan there with Manu Ginobili and Tony Parker. I understand it, but nevertheless, I'm still looking at what you've done and how badly you wanted it, as opposed to just going along to get along and doing your job. I'm sorry, James Harden's more valuable than that. I'm looking at a Steph Curry, the greatest shooter in the world. You talk about ball movement, Max Kellerman. You talk about how people have to change things around. Max Kellerman, I got news for you. Who led the league in assists last year? Not this past season, last season, when he was runner-up for league MVP. That would be James Harden. Do you know that Steph Curry has a career average of 6.8 assists per game? He's the greatest shooter in the world. We know he can score. We know how big time he is, et cetera, et cetera. Steph Curry averaged 30 in 2015, 2016. This past season, he averaged 26. We know how surreal Steph Curry is. But James Harden has never averaged less than 25 a game since he arrived in Houston after being a reserve at OKC. James Harden has averaged 30 the last 2 years. James Harden averaged 29 and 29 the last 2 seasons before averaging 30 this year. Do you also know that James Harden gets to the free throw line an average of 10 games the last 4 years? the last 4 years and 5 of the last 6 years. He gets to the free throw line. So we're talking about a cat that can shoot. We're talking about a cat that can dance on you, get to the hole. Nobody can guard him one-on-one. He can get his shot in the paint whenever he wants. He's a southpaw. He's a lefty. He can shoot threes. He can get to the hole. He gets to the free throw line more frequently than any of those guys that I mentioned. Not to mention the fact that he's averaging up there in assists as well.
He's third in assists this year.
Defensively, we get it because he's taking too much time off, even though we praised him at times for showing up and trying to play defense at points this year. But in the end, when you look at what an unstoppable presence he is offensively, I don't know 5 guys in the NBA that could be that unstoppable offensively.
You have Harden fourth. You have him fourth, and he has him sixth.
I'm saying you can even put him 5 because I'm talking about LeBron, KD, Anthony Davis, automatic.
Right.
But
After that,
took
it's
Steph
debatable.
and Kawhi out, and he kept them in.
The best players in basketball, as much as people like to say it's a point guard league, look at any era. The best players in basketball since Michael Jordan are almost always two-way wings. And when they're not the best, it's only because a rim defending guy who can also score and defend, whatever defense means, it's changed for bigs. They got to be able to step out and switch and do all those things nowadays. Back then they didn't. But nevertheless, you have to have a defensive big who can also be the focal point of your offense. A Tim Duncan, a Shaquille O'Neal can be the best in basketball in the post-Jordan era, right? Anthony Davis fits into that description. Kevin Durant, Kawhi Leonard, LeBron James, those are two-way wings. Those guys are all better than James Harden. Really, it comes down to me. You can argue Kawhi's health. That's it. It comes down to me, Steph or James Harden. Steph doesn't have the same kind of assists, but mainly that's because he plays off ball a lot. James Harden completely monopolizes the ball when he's on the floor. Even with Chris Paul there, Chris Paul is the guy playing off ball and actually very good playing off ball. James Harden has the ball in his hands more. He has higher assist totals. Were you to put Steph Curry in a D'Antoni offense, his assist totals would go way up.